All right, so today I wanted to do a fairly entry-level maintenance repair. This is usually everyone's introduction into working on their own car and maintaining it themselves. There's plenty of people who their parents teach them or they pick it up along the way. But for those of you who have never had it kind of gone through, this is how you do an oil change. Now, I'm doing it on my 2002 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4.0. This will be fairly standard for really any vehicle. Oil changes are pretty much done universally the same way across the board. It's just there's going to be one or two things that are going to be a little different. So you can compare with your vehicle and just kind of be prepared for whatever might be different. Now, the most important things that you're going to have to look up on your own is the specific type of oil that you'll need, being like 10W30 for my own, and that varies from your location, if you're in colder areas or if you're in warmer areas or you're doing different uses of your vehicle. The oil that you're gonna pick is going to be very important in that way. So if you have any sort of questions, you can try and trust your local auto parts people. Some stores are hit or miss. Some are really good. They have like genuine retired mechanics in it. Other ones just kind of have, cashiers. So take that with a grain of salt. Maybe look it up on Google first real quick. I'm picking high mileage for mine. My Jeep Grand Cherokee has 165,000 miles on it. There's plenty of people that hate high mileage oil. They think that it actually does more damage. I haven't experienced that on any of my high mileage vehicles, so I'm still trusting it. But take that for what it's worth as well. The next part is going to be the specific oil filter. Usually they'll have books in the stores next to your oil filters that'll help you look up the exact year of your vehicle, exact engine type. Again, you can ask your cashier, your register person to help you out as well, but you can use that book. Again, take that with a grain of salt. Sometimes they're a little different, and I'll show you that today as well. This one ends up being a little different from what I'm used to. Next thing you'll need, just a very basic funnel. This is a tool that you don't specifically need, but I would say if you're worried about getting a good grip or having a lot of strength to turn off the filter, this one specifically is like a wrench off feature. So it'll help me for the next time I'm doing an oil change, but the one that's on there is not. So I bought this tool a little while ago. I had a vehicle that it was like fused because it was super old. So normally I could just do it with my hand, but if you want, pick up one of these. That'll definitely save you some time, some heartache. Next thing is going to be a pan to catch your oil. You're gonna have to know exactly how much oil that your engine will need. You'll probably find that information along the same time that you're finding what specific oil that you need. In my case, it's 6 quarts. So when you get your pan, you need to know that this is going to hold all the oil that is going to come out of your engine. So hypothetically, if it hasn't been leaking a ton, if you're putting 6 quarts in, you're getting 6 quarts out. So keep that in mind. Final thing is going to be just a way to get off the oil plug, the oil drain plug, which I'll show you. Again, this is going to be specific to your vehicle. You might be able to look it up, or you can just, if you have a set like this, trial and error in a simple ratchet. The only thing that I'm omitting that I don't need in my specific case, just because my Jeep is fairly high off the ground, especially if you have a lifted vehicle. You could do this without lifting your vehicle at all. If you have a car like this bad boy or my Camaro, I do have to use a jack with jack stands. I might do a video on just kind of properly setting that up. Again, if you're not comfortable with it, do some research. It's very important. Just a real fast intro into it. Jack it up safely. Put your jack stand under. Trust the jack stand. The jack is literally just supposed to lift your vehicle. And yeah, I can hold it for a little while, but if I'm ever gonna personally go under a vehicle, I want to know I have something that is solid. So I put the jack stand under, lower the jack a little bit just so the weight is actually on the jack stand. You can pump it up a little bit just so you kind of have both of them that are holding it, but make sure the majority of the weight, or all of the weight, is on that jack stand. So another reason I want to go with the Jeep is it actually has a really obvious location for the filter. It's just on the side, and again, this is a 4.0 inline 6, so it's got the oil filter right there on the side, super obvious. Easy example with this one too is a lot of the older blocks, and maybe even what you have, is just going to have oil filter right there on the side. So again, you're going to be picking up an oil filter, so you're going to know what it looks like, but typical location is just going to be right there at the bottom. Mine is a little funky, it's on the side, but it also makes it easy to show. Another thing while I'm down here is you can see the oil drain plug right there for this one. So it's always in a fairly obvious location. It's going to be the pan underneath the engine, because this is engine motor oil. You're not draining anything else, so you just have to look where the engine block is, and then you'll find that usually a fairly obvious plug. So I have my pan right there to catch the oil. Another thing to keep in mind while doing this is it's best to do it kind of in the driveway, slightly slanted, with obviously the rear end at the lower portion, just so it drains straight out. Or you can do it on level ground. You know, obviously that's how they're doing it in the shops, but you don't want to have the front end significantly lower. It's not a huge difference, but obviously you're going to want to try and get as much of the oil out as you can. So that's just going to be the better way to do it. I'm going to try and get this off and still kind of film it, but another really important thing to do while you're doing this, and shops might not even be, you know, paying attention, but if there's a problem with the engine, especially something older, there might be some metal flakes and metal bits in your oil, and that's telling you that there's an actual problem with your engine. It's starting to rub, so that could be, you know, poor oil pressure, not good oil, not changing your oil frequently enough, just bad bearings, which is just the result of, you know, old age, stuff like that. Most of these drain plugs have magnets on them, and so that's another thing you could do when you pull off the drain plug. Just give it a quick look and see if you have any metal. But I'm gonna go ahead and throw a glove on, and while it's draining, I'm gonna just kind of feel around, see if I find anything metallic. Some people will actually cut the filters and just kind of feel out the threads in them, like the filter kind of fins, just to see if there's metal flakes in there as well. Maybe that's not something you're interested in, but just a very basic check to make sure that there's not a serious problem is to just kind of watch as it drains and check the oil once it's out. Alright, so I did switch sides for better leverage, but it was pretty on there. So if you have a cheater bar or a breaker bar, I would suggest that for any time that they put it on a little too tight. There you go. So pretty black. I took a road trip, so it was definitely due. No metal on this or anything. Looks like they put a little bit of a gasket on it, so they probably saw that it was leaking. You could put a little bit of a gasket, but I wouldn't overdo it. You don't want to glue this thing on there by any means. But yeah, pretty slick. Nothing overly rough in there. No metal. So just let it go ahead and fill up. So now we have all the oil drained out and the plug put back on. Now we'll do the filter. Would be removing the oil filter while you're still underneath the car, but again, just because this one's kind of in a funky location on the side, I can do it from up top. And so I just moved my oil pan underneath, because there will still be some residual oil in this. This one will probably have less just because of the angle, but certainly in a one where it's at the bottom upside down. It's just going to be full with as much as it can hold of oil. So just make sure you have a pan ready, and let me go ahead and crank this off. Alright, so I wanted to loosen it so I could just unscrew it, but there you go, see? A little bit left. Ah! And it just pops off. Boom. There's your oil filter. So here's another thing I wanted to show. So this is the oil filter that came off. Now, I went to an actual, shop that gives you a free car wash with their oil change. I do it when it's convenient. But this is the one that literally just came off it. This is the one that if you Google, if you look at their, in-store magazine, this is the size you're supposed to get. So, seeing the vast difference between the two. And, I mean, this one has the welded on wrench off nut, but again, so what is important is this inner part. So the threads are pretty much always going to be the same no matter almost whatever your vehicle is. It's almost always going to have the same thread, but this circumference needs to be the same, and it's identical on both. So the parts that the oil is actually going to interact with and everything is exactly the same on both, but obviously the capacity on this one is significantly bigger. So I tried to do some research on this one. Technically it works for the Jeep Cherokees, but it wasn't designed or intended for the Jeep Cherokees as far as I could see. It's just like GM products, like super vague. So likely they either just get these for really cheap or what have you. So don't be discouraged if what you take off and what you see is the genuinely recommended filter is different. And again, these parts are exactly the same. This is going to have a bigger capacity, so take that for what it's worth. But want to kind of show that real quick, that another thing, another benefit of you doing your own oil changes is you're controlling what's being put on your vehicle. You're controlling what oil is going into your vehicle. So sometimes, it's worth it, and, ultimately this should be cheaper if you're doing it right. So at this point, you've drained all the oil, you've replaced your oil filter with your shiny new one. The final part is just putting back in the oil, or putting in your new one rather. So what you'll find is some people will go through the dipstick. It's just gonna take forever. It's gonna be super messy. It's not necessarily wrong, but you're gonna get back pressure. So unless there's another way for air to get in, it's not recommended. So what you'll find is there's going to be a cap that says engine oil, usually bright yellow. Mine in particular came off right here, and so you'll go ahead and throw your funnel in there and begin to add. Now again, this is going to be the portion where you've looked up exactly how many quarts of oil your engine is going to take. Be patient with filling it. It has to go into a lot of different areas, so just slowly fill it. Make sure you're keeping track of how many quarts are going in, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling it up. Alright, so starting to fill. Now each of these is 5 quarts. My particular engine takes 6, so I know I'm safe in throwing this entire one in. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have an oil filter that is, vertical up and down, not like sideways like mine, you should actually throw a little oil in there as well. It's just good practice to make sure that it's got plenty where it needs to go. It doesn't really work when it's sideways like that for mine. There you go. There is 5 quarts, and then let me go grab that last quart. So another thing to note is you can buy these actually individually in exactly 1 quart, but it's usually a little cheaper to do it this way. So what I did is I had some of my extra oil, and you'll notice that it has little hashes on the back, one for liters, one for quart, and I just filled this one up. It's a little sloped, the Jeep, so it's not showing exactly, but I had it on level ground, and so I just filled it up to that 1 quart, and now I know that I'm putting exactly 1 quart, so I have a total of 6 quarts in my engine. And you'll hear as it starts to settle, it'll just kind of burble around. So let it sit for a little bit. I'm gonna replace the oil cap, and then I'm going to look at my dipstick and see where that oil level is. It should be exactly what I'm looking for. Alright, cap is replaced. I've checked the filter area and I checked the plug to make sure there were no leaks. Good there. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my dipstick. You can see I got some oil going. So what I'll do is I will clean off the dipstick one-handed, place, one-handed, and hard to see because it's so clean, but I am good to go at the safe. So there you have it, oil change. Another thing I didn't mention, make sure you put your e-brake on. That way you're nice and safe anytime that you're going underneath your vehicle. There you go.